Welcome, residents, to the Dr. DC podcast. My name is producer Richard, and across from me is the doctor himself.
Hello.
Each week, we talk about the weird and wonderful world of DC while fielding questions from listeners just like you. This week, we are joined by a very special guest, Kelly McNeely.
Yeah, Kelly McNeely.
No, I like Kelly McNeely.
Guys.
Howdy.
I like Kelly McNeely too. Kelly McNells also works.
Oh, that works
I get
too.
it all.
Kelly McNeely.
Yeah. Yeah, Kelly is a writer for iHorror. Just a general dope human, but she knows more about
she's forgotten more about horror than we'd ever know.
Exactly. And film in general, but yeah. All of like the best like non-blockbuster movies that I've seen are because she's recommended them to me.
Well, I mean, you brought me True Detective season 1, so I think that's a fair balance.
One victory.
That's fair. That's a good balance, yeah.
But she introduced me to Brawl in Cell Block 99.
S. Craig Zahler, so good.
That movie affected me. It's hard to sleep after watching that movie. Yeah, I was shook. That and Green Room, both of those, yeah.
Oh, have you watched Hold the Dark yet on Netflix? Same director. It's incredible. Watch it.
I hear it's really good.
Sorry, what's it called?
It's so good. Hold the Dark. I saw it at TIFF. It had its premiere there. It's Jeremy Saulnier, so it's the same director that did Green Room and earlier Blue Ruin.
Oh, I love Green Room so much.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the script is adapted from a novel, and the script was adapted by Macon Blair, who's in a lot of Saulnier's films. He's in Green Room as well as he's like the main character in Blue Ruin. And yeah, he's just an amazing human being.
Well, hot damn.
They both are. There you go.
So normally when we do an episode, we do some like news, but when we have a new guest on, we sort of skip that segment and go straight to things
learning about who they are.
Yeah, like maybe give a little get to know you.
Jesus.
So I mean,
we're also very drunk and full of turkey right now.
We may have just had Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah. If I fall asleep halfway through this, if I fall asleep, it has nothing to do with the quality of the content, but more of just the amount of turkey that's in me.
So why don't we start with I've outlined that you have some horror credentials. Do you want to talk a little bit about like how you got into horror?
Sure. I'm very glad that you over-enunciate horror because I have a really bad habit of not doing that, and it just comes out sounding like horror, and it gets really muddled.
What did you just call me?
You know what you are.
Yeah, I'm a gin whore right now.
So I have been writing for iHorror.com for just under 2 years.
That's iHorror.com. Don't go to the other website.
You're going to get very different content. So I've been writing there for about 2 years now. I just came off of doing media accreditation coverage for TIFF, which was awesome. So I got to go check that out and did the red carpet thing.
Was there good horror? Premiere. Was there good horror during TIFF?
Yeah. The David Gordon Green's Halloween just premiered, which was awesome.
I'm wanting to see that.
I really love that one. It's really good. And yeah, there's a lot of incredible films, and I did reviews for a ton of them, so you can check them out at iHorror.com. I've also done a couple of writings, I guess, elsewhere. So I've done some stuff at 1428 Elm, Netflix Life, and more recently I've been doing some studies on cultural history of horror over at Salem Film Festival. So I've done a couple of essays for them about how each culture sort of affects the horror that they produce.
That's awesome. What got you into horror in the first place? Like what was it about like those types of movies or those types of stories, and you were like, that's for me?
Yeah. That's a real good question that I don't know how to answer. I think I remember, one of the earliest horror films that I really got into was kind of at the same time, both Poltergeist and The Exorcist, were like the two first movies that I like watched that I was like, oh, shit, why does this awaken something in me? So sort of after I watched those, I started getting a little bit more enticed by that whole concept of things that are really kind of dark and horrible and fascinating on that way. So yeah, I just started watching more of them. And I mean, my family was never really big into horror movies, so it was kind of a gradual, like I like to say it's more of a ongoing courtship I've been having with horror.
Right.
So we've been doing a lot of catching up, but once I got into high school and university and had the opportunity to watch a lot of stuff, I've just kind of, I guess, taken it from there.
Right. So this being
a lot of stuff,
we're in the middle of October right now. Ooh.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure a lot of our listeners are looking for some scary stuff to watch. Is there anything that you would recommend, maybe that of this year, maybe that or something that you're very recently like getting into that you might want to recommend?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Do you want me to talk specifically about like Netflix or just stuff
whatever you want, whatever
available?
you're feeling.
All right. So for horror recommendations, I don't know if it's on Netflix still, but Troll Hunter is a fantastic Norwegian horror film that's directed by Andre, or I can never remember his last name, but it's an incredible sort of mockumentary about a group of film students that follow someone that they think is a bear hunter and then find out that he's hunting something that's a little bit different. That director also went on to do something called The Autopsy of Jane Doe, which is, I think, one of the greatest films of the last couple of years. It's really kind of creepy and different, and that's one of the ones that I love if you just go in totally blind.
Is that one also on Netflix, the Jane Doe one?
I'm not sure if it is now. I believe it's on Shudder. I'm not sure if that's a thing, but sticking with Netflix, of course, Green Room, absolutely incredible. One of my favorites of the last couple of years as well is called The Devil's Candy, which was directed by Sean Byrne, who is the same director, he's Australian, that he did a movie called The Loved Ones back in, I want to say 2015. So it was a couple years. I think it actually got distribution in 2015. It's older than that. But anyway, so he did this amazing movie that's sort of like this sunburnt Texas gothic thriller type of American gothic sort of scenario. It's a combination of like partially haunted house, partially possession, partially like just a dad trying desperately to hold on to his family. And the dad is played by Ethan Embry, and I fucking love him in this movie. He looks like a tattooed Jesus, and I love him to death. It's one of my favorites. And then for the edgelords out there, I highly recommend I Saw the Devil. I Saw the Devil's, it's an incredible Korean film that's one of my absolute favorites of all time. But it's really fucking dark, so I don't throw that one around. Can I swear? Is that fine?
Hell yeah. Fuck yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Fuck yeah. All right, let's do that.
So then, as enjoying horror films and TV and stuff like that, where does it cross over to things like literature? Do you enjoy horror novels? Do you read horror like graphic novels or comics or things like that? Because that is a genre.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One series that I sort of picked up and ran with for a while was Crossed, which I really enjoyed, but it's sort of a little bit, it's a little bit more of an anthology sort of style where each volume is sort of episodic. It just kind of takes its own story. But that was one that the first volume is one of the strongest sort of entries in horror graphic novels that I've read in a very long time. But it's, again, really fucking dark. But I really love that one. Preacher, I'm a huge fan of Preacher. So when the series came out for that, I was very excited. Yeah, I mean, The Killing Joke was one of the first graphic novels that I read that I'm not sure if it quite counts as horror, but I think it does.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, it borrows elements, right? I mean, it's like anything else, right? It takes some storytelling elements from different things. Yeah.
Of course. And then naturally, like Stephen King, Joe Hill. I've been really getting into Gillian Flynn recently with Sharp Objects and Gone Girl, and she's an amazing writer. So yeah, just basically whatever I can get my hands on. I've been doing a lot more sort of academic reading as well. So looking into like The Monster Show is one that I just picked up. That's a complete history or somewhat complete history of American horror films and sort of where those themes are borrowed from. So if you look at, say, for example, vampires and how it ties back to like the AIDS crisis and all this stuff and how it's kind of really weird and interconnected, that I find super, super fucking interesting.
That's awesome. Now, I know for this episode, we're going to be talking about Swamp Thing. The monstrous, shambling mass of muck. But I know for that, you... As you do in all things, very dedicated. You like went through how much of Alan Moore's run?
Yeah, so as I do with kind of with everything, I did a ton of research because I love to do research. And I mean, Wes Craven is absolutely incredible as a director. And like, that's another reason why I really wanted to come in and talk about Swamp Thing, because how the fuck did Wes Craven make this movie?
Well, right. So we've got the movies on deck, and I know that you read a bunch of Alan Moore's like saga of the Swamp Thing too.
I did.
Because those two things couldn't be more different, and I think it's hilarious to try and compare them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, why don't we just talk a little bit about the movies off the get-go? Had you seen either of these Swamp Thing movies before?
You know what, honestly, I had not. No.
Richard,
this is a new...
No, I've never.
This is a new for all of us. No, Reed, you'd seen them, yeah?
Oh,
sorry,
yeah.
Doc, you'd seen them, yeah?
Oh, I mean, by this point, everyone knows who I am. Yeah.
78 episodes in, it's 60 of them have been times where we said Reed. So
yeah, yeah, pretty much.
Then
Superman is Clark Kent.
Yeah.
Yes, I have seen both of these movies before. Although I will say that watching them again for this episode, my
didn't hold up.
Well, it didn't hold up the way I remembered them holding up. But why don't we talk a little bit about let's talk about the first one. That's the one that Wes Craven, who you mentioned, directed.
Yes, yeah, he wrote and directed that one.
Yeah.
One of the things that I kind of really loved about it that was a bit of a weird Easter egg for Wes Craven fans out there is there's the one henchman, Ferret.
Yep.
Who was played by David Hess, who, by the way, is absolutely incredible. Like, he wrote music for Elvis in the 50s and 60s.
Oh,
and,
really?
like, he's done giallo work. He's written English script translations for Rainer Werner Fassbinder. Like, he wrote tracks for Eli Roth's Cabin Fever. He did all the music for Last House on the Left. But
Really?
he actually stars in Last House on the Left as well as, like, kind of the head villain.
Right.
So I think that was one of his earlier film roles. Or one of his earlier, like, leading film roles, I'll say.
Right.
And he's amazing. Like, he's so talented in like the weirdest, creepiest way, and I love him to death. So that was a fun little like, oh, I know this guy.
That he's in there at all. Yeah. So basically he plays a guy, for those that haven't seen the movie, he plays a guy that's he's meant to be running like the security at this swamp science installation where Dr. Alec Holland is working on his biorestorative formula.
As he's wont to do.
Yeah, and then it's revealed later that he's like actually working for Anton Arcane, the villain played by Louis Jourdan, who fans of James Bond will remember as the villain from Octopussy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he's in Gigi.
Yeah, and he's also in Gigi for fans of musical theater.
I know there's a lot of crossover in your fan base.
Oh my god, so much. I mean, this movie is basically, it's like the origin of Swamp Thing. Alec Holland is working on this formula. Arcane wants it. In the sort of scuffle, he ends up doused in the formula and then set on fire, and then he wanders into the swamp and dies. But he doesn't die. He becomes the Swamp Thing. And then it's basically just him and Arcane after each other for the rest of the movie. It's kind of slow as a movie. Like, there's not a lot of action scenes.
And the funny thing about it for me is that, like, Wes Craven wanted to make that one because he wanted to show major Hollywood studios that he could, like, handle action and stunts and, like, major stars with Adrienne Barbeau and Louis Jourdan. Like, he wanted to show them, like, hey, guys, I can totally do this. Well, I mean, there is that, I was going to say incredible. There is that boat chase scene, which is a boat chase scene.
Yes, they are technically chasing in a boat. Yeah.
So that's great. I love that. But yeah, it's you're right. It's kind of a weird pace. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't recall Swamp Thing having like healing powers. Is this a thing?
Well, I mean, you could say he has healing powers in that he can access any plant. So, you know, theoretically, if the healing property of a plant comes in handy, he could gain that. But yeah, in this movie, he just puts his hand on a couple of characters and it glows like radioactive green.
Yeah.
And then they're healed magically. And there's like Adrienne Barbeau gets stabbed through the chest and he heals her.
Yeah.
The little kid
basically
that
brings her back to life.
There's a little like 12-year-old kid that runs a gas station in this movie, and he heals him when Arcane's men kind of rough him up.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. This movie seems, for something, if he was trying to prove that he wanted to do action and like sort of big movies and stuff like that, it's made as if it were a low budget horror movie. From
which I think
costumes,
is like obviously his forte. Yeah,
from costumes to script to the way it's shot to like it doesn't even feel like it's shot on as good a quality film as other movies in 1982. Like it, the whole thing feels low budget. And
the costume like physically hurt me. Dick Durock is doing his darndest. And the thing is I absolutely believe him when he's like looking pained and uncomfortable, which he's doing for a lot
acting
of
the hell out of like no script.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I that's one of the things that I really love about the first one in 1982 is that like he's suffering. He's just not happy with his life situation currently.
Yeah.
And I think there's even a line that he says at some point that's like laughing is painful or something like that.
Like it only hurts when I laugh. It's because he gets his arm chopped off and she asks, Adrienne Barbeau asks if it hurts and he says, only when I laugh. And it's like one of the first lines he has as Swamp Thing.
Which is amazing.
It's funny. The irony, I think, is that if Wes Craven wanted to do action movies, the second movie, Return of Swamp Thing, which is 1984, I think, when that one came out.
I think that was 89.
Is it that much later? Oh,
yeah, it's 1989.
Cow.
Yeah.
Well, at any rate, that one is like an action comedy. It's like it's like almost what I would expect like a silly C-grade Marvel movie to be.
Oh yeah, well I'm not sure if you're familiar with the works of director Jim Wynorski. He's known for such brilliant films as The Bear Wench Project 1 through 5 because he commits, Cleavage Fields.
I thought 4 was really where it made its strides.
House on Hooter Hill, Busty Cops, Legend of the Naked Ghost, and my personal favorite, A Doggone Christmas.
Do you know what, though? That kind of makes sense, because that second movie is... I think the second movie was super poorly reviewed. Like, people were like, this sucks, it's too silly, it's like cheap... Like all of these things, but there's stuff about that second movie that watching it again, I was like, it's actually more like Swamp Thing. The costume is better.
Yeah.
He actually has like some plant powers. Like he grows himself a new body out of a bathtub at one point.
Which is amazing.
Yeah. Like that's an actual Swamp Thing. He's not just like a monster that lives in the swamp. He, like Arcane, the villain, in the first one, he's just like sort of gentlemanly and nothing else about him is any particularly descript. In the second one, he's been resurrected. He's kind of undead. He's sort of immortal. He's making the Unmen, which are big from the comic books. Like the second,
and they look like they're from The Thing. Like they're terrifying.
The second one, in a weird way, even though it's probably like a shittier movie, it's like way more Swamp Thing, which is
and it also has that amazing moment from. Is it like, oh my gosh, what is the line? This from one of the Alan Moore runs. It's Spring. I want to say it was Spring Awakening, but I know that's just a musical. That where basically Abby Arcane eats like the pustule thing and like just trips balls and they just fuck. And I do love that they included that in this movie. Yeah, I love that they included that in this one because again, it was 89. It was like after Alan Moore's run.
So in the first movie, Adrienne Barbeau is the female lead. She plays a character called Alex Cable, which I think is meant to be a reference to Matthew Cable, who was a character in the original Swamp Thing.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like a combination of Matthew Cable and Abby as well. Like they just kind of shoved him into one character.
But then in the second movie, Heather Locklear is straight up playing Abigail Arcane, like Swamp Thing's actual love interest from the comic. Again, the second movie somehow being more like comic faithful, even though it's like way shittier.
But that costume, though, so much better.
The second one's full of like one-liners and things like that. It's a weird movie.
It's and like so many explosions. Like, how is that whole swamp so goddamn explosive?
Methane, man.
The close-up on that headline on the paper where it's like the two kids and it just says "local resort goes boom" was my favorite headline I've ever seen in a fictional newspaper.
That's amazing.
I thought that was an amazing detail. And also like that one henchman that like, I don't think that man has ever used an inhaler because he's doing it so horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And like even with like the pouring of the when Swamp Thing goes into the bathtub, like him like drawing the shower curtains to like emerge from the bathtub is like the most anticlimactic moment of like he's coming out of this bathtub, he's like poured himself through the faucet to go rescue his lady, and he's just like, and we're in the bathroom. It's just there's so many like moments that are really comedic and you're not sure if they're supposed to be or not.
Well, I think a bunch of the reviews at the time said that this movie is like not even half as funny as it thinks it is.
Yeah, and also like Swamp Thing is so freaking happy. Like he's cracking wise and like has the whitest teeth I've ever seen.
He's like Tony
hero.
Stark. He speaks in Return of Swamp Thing like he's Tony Stark. He's quipping and he's like being flippant with people and stuff like that. It's really crazy.
And I love that it's also like they didn't even use Dick Durock's voice for that one. Like they had some uncredited, like some unknown voice actor come in and basically dub over all of the lines for Swamp Thing. And apparently the director, Jim Wynorski and Dick Durock, neither of them knew this was happening. So they just kind of like went to see a final cut of it and was like, who is this? This is not the voice we had.
For you conspiracy theorists out there, this proves that there's a long history of producer influence in DC films.
A studio interference. It happens,
right?
But yeah, and yeah, because he's so quippy and he's like driving around in a Jeep and cracking wise, and it's just so bizarre.
So if you had to make like a quick list of like things that work and things that don't work in both of those films, what would you say they are? So for the first film, like what's good about it? What doesn't sit well?
Just like as a movie in general, you mean?
Sure, yeah. Or specifically even like related to Swamp Thing, because I know you've read a bunch of the Alan Moore stuff too. But yeah, both.
Yeah. I mean, I think for the first one, one of the things that really works for me was Adrienne Barbeau. I love her and I love that she's kind of just going into like this brassy, like she's confident and capable and like doing her thing, and she's just kind of throwing punches in with one of the like the moment kind of in the beginning where they come in and attack the lab and she's like outside like beating them up. I love that. It's this wonderful little like she's capable. She's not a damsel in distress. Of course, that's all thrown out the window later on when he loses his arm and she just like straight up faints because she can't handle it for some reason because there's zero blood. But she was one of the things that worked for me. I don't think this is a plus side, but one of the things that I thought was incredible was the henchman Bruno, who had like the most Shakespearean diction I've ever heard of like a random villain.
Yeah, that was a guy that like played Lear in his hometown, and then
and this is like his movie. Breakout role in film. I'm assuming.
Yeah, totally.
I did like how there was that. Speaking of Bruno, I did like how there was that kind of twist with the formula of like, it highlights these elements of what are already in you. So for Bruno, because he was actually like pretty timid and like small, like it turned him into like this weird little possum creature thing. I liked that element of it. I'm trying to honestly, like, I think a lot of what makes that movie fun is the performances. Like Wes Craven's a great director. Like he knows how to work with actors and he does a great job with it. But as far as like the actual relation to Swamp Thing, there was a lot there that I was like, is this a thing? Because I don't remember this being a thing. Now, I do have to say that one of the huge bonuses of Swamp Thing coming out in 1982 is like that was kind of what pushed them, the popularity of the movie was kind of what pushed them to like revive Swamp Thing. So there's like 1982 with, was it Martin Pascoe? That kind of started the revival before Alan Moore stepped in? Yeah,
Alan Moore didn't step in until 1984. So the big thing is that first Swamp Thing movie, like, is nothing like really what modern Swamp Thing is, because that didn't get invented yet.
Absolutely, yeah.
But the thing that I like about the first one is I think it's the only one that kind of captures that sort of like morose, sad Frankenstein's monster kind of side to the character.
Yes, yeah.
The second one clearly doesn't do that because he's like he's like Will Smithing his way through the screenplay. But but in the first one you do like the end of the movie is he shambles sadly back into the swamp. Like that's
He's just like a very sad womp womp kind of character, which I love because I feel like a large part of that is kind of what Swamp Thing is in general. Like, not that he's like a self-pitying type of thing, but like he's not having a good time.
Well, and certainly
he's in
even
a
back
kind of
to
a weird situation.
Even back to the original like first appearance of Swamp Thing, which isn't Alec Holland. It's set like Victorian era, and his name is Alex Olson, and that story is just like a straight up like a Mary Shelley sort of like derivative story about this man turned into a monster after he's betrayed, and he's just sort of sadly looking through the window at the person he used to love, and then he just like shambles off into the swamp again. Like, it's a very sad kind of gothic story.
And I love that also kind of comes into Alan Moore's run, or he didn't write the story of that one. It was written by, is it Len Wein?
Len Wein, yeah.
Sure. But yeah, he kind of wrote something in one of the Swamp Thing Alan Moore stories. Like, it was based on that story, and it kind of explores that, where Swamp Thing is Alex Olson, and he comes back and he's defeated this man that's ruined him, and his wife is just so horrified at the sight of him, and he's lost the ability to speak because it's been so long since he's used his vocal cords, and he's a very tragic character.
Yeah, they retconned that original one in as a previous avatar of the Green, because things like the Green weren't around originally, but yeah, they worked Alex Olson back in there. So I love that they did that, because again, like, he's a very tragic character, and I like how it kind of incorporates that emotional complexity a little bit more than the romp that is the 1989 version. Now, in the 1989 one, what to you like works or doesn't work?
I think because it's so ridiculously campy and over the top. Like, again, it's not a great movie, but my God, is it entertaining. Like, it's just totally fucking ridiculous and a lot of fun, even though it's just like kind of terrible.
My memory of it was that the first movie was great and the second one was complete shit, and then I watched them again and I was like, the first movie's kind of boring and the second one's kind of fun. It's like,
I think the second holds up better, which I feel horrible saying, but it's true. Like, it does kind of hold up better over time, as when we're used to watching things like Troll 2 and The Room, where it's like that entertainment and ridiculous schlocky films, which is like a huge part of like horror genre. Is like, there's all those amazing like 70s and 80s movies that you watch them and like, they're not great, but my God, are they fun.
Even the first Halloween isn't very good. Like, you
take that back.
It's pretty boring.
No, it's amazing, and I will fight you on that.
I'm not going to take on the horror expert about Halloween. I'm just going to gracefully back away.
I mean, I do love also that like Dick Durock came back for that. Like, wasn't he the first DC hero actor to come into a role aside from Christopher Reeve, or to reprise a role other than Christopher Reeve? I think.
I guess
he's like the second one to do that. Yeah,
because Adam West only did one movie, so.
Yeah, and then he went on to do the TV series in the 90s as well, when that was a thing.
Was Dick Durock the voice in the cartoon?
I think there was like another live action one, wasn't there? In the 90s? Or maybe it was the cartoon. I know there was another one in the 90s that he came back for.
I only remember the cartoon. Yeah.
I don't know which one it is, so I'm gonna trust you on that. But yeah, he did go back for the 90s series that they had. For me, like, a large part of what makes that one work is, again, that schlock factor. That it's just so ridiculous and so over the top that it's just kind of a wild ride. And those kids are awful, but I found myself laughing at them, even though I hated them so fucking much.
So, on that note, we've asked for a bunch of questions about Swamp Thing.
Yeah, we did.
We sort of directed it a little bit, so hopefully we have some questions about the films and hopefully about the Alan Moore run, but there are some sort of general Swamp Thing questions in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, why don't we get into it?
Let's head on to the questions.
All right.
Man, I am drunk. Just so everybody's on the same page. I got so much gin in me.
Yeah, you haven't even had that much.
Okay, you know how many shots I put in this thing, right? Too many. Let's fuck.
Wow, keep going. Let's try again.
Let's head on over to Twitter.
Twitter.
Sorry, what were you going to say, Kelly?
I was going to say, I really hope that you end this with like a full rendition of "I've Had the Time of My Life."
Oh, that's
appropriate.
It's true.
I'm just saying, I'm just putting that out there in the universe.
This really is the Seinfeld of podcasts, so it makes sense.
How dare you?
So our first question's from Stump Chunkman.
Step into the stump Chunkman.
First
Okay.
We've got drops.
Yeah. Oh, we got drops plenty.
Drops for days.
Stump asks, "Does he make your heart sing?"
Yeah.
What does this mean? What does this mean?
He's referencing the fact that for the cartoon they just ripped off Wild Thing by the Trugs. So it was
so he makes you.
Thing.
No.
He make my heart.
Yeah, okay, that's.
I mean, the answer
That's
is yes.
amazing.
He does make my heart sing.
I think the real question is
He
like
does.
how the hell did they pay for that song?
I think it counts as parody, so I think that's fair use.
That's the dumbest thing ever, and I'm so glad they did it.
I wish they had used that as the theme for the movies, though.
Well, it's better than
Instead of like Born on the Bayou by CCR.
That's true. That's how the second one opens.
It is, yeah, with like this gorgeous comic book montage of comic book
Yeah.
pages that like are way better than what actually happens in the movie.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly.
I just think it works so much better for Swamp Thing than I don't know if you heard the original version, which was Spider-Man. Just like a spider can. Works a lot better for Swamp Thing. But all right, let's go on to the next one.
Superman. He's snapping Zod's neck.
It works with so many heroes.
Yeah. It's really the perfect song. I think we should use
like
it for
it.
everything. I like that a lot.
Take it to DC.
DC execs, we know you're.
Never.
We know this is on in the background.
Yeah. Preacher.
He's got an arse face.
All right, let's head on to the next question. So the next question comes on Twitter from Let's Talk Swamp Thing.
Wow, from the source itself.
That's right. So I feel like this should be an appropriate question.
Yeah.
Which is, what's your opinion on the return of evil Dennis in the Moore era? I was a bit disappointed that a character that we saw cared and loved Liz suddenly changed a lot, but I loved Liz with Chester. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, Kelly, do you want to
Okay.
talk about Dennis a bit?
Yeah, absolutely, I do. So one of the things that I love about that twist with evil Dennis is, Liz was such a strong and capable character on her own before, coming into Volume 20, that her kind of development through Dennis speaks so many volumes about emotional abuse. There's that line when they come in with issue 20, which is Moore's first issue, where they have that little intimate moment in the car, and he's basically like chasing after her, and she says something to the effect of like, all we have in common is the horror in our lives. And I fucking love that, because that's something I think about every single time I watch a ridiculous action movie and then they pair up at the end, and I'm like, listen, I know young Christian Slater is super hot in Broken Arrow, but these two have nothing in common and they've spoken nothing about their personal lives. So I appreciate that. Also, again, because it kind of speaks to that, like, he's essentially been friend zoned at that point. And it kind of blends into like this obsession and this paranoia that she's going to leave. So he kind of keeps her in the dark because he kind of wants to keep her around. And like, there's also, I think, flashes of PTSD in there. I think he mentions Nom at one point. But it kind of plays with like that battered wife syndrome and the effects of abuse on the spouse. And I really love that. I mean, again, like, maybe it's the edgelord in me, but like, I was kind of like, yes! Like, I every time that there's a character that turns evil like that, there's a big part of me that's like, fuck yeah, I love seeing that.
Well, and so Dennis and Liz were supporting characters. They were like meant to be part of like the crew for Swamp Thing. But was Dennis not also being leaned on by that corporation? Wasn't there some element of that too, where he was like, maybe somewhat unwillingly made to kind of go against his so-called friends, etc., etc.?
Yeah, I think they were, I may be wrong on this, but I believe that they were like leaned on by the corporation. And again, like they kind of ran off and went in hiding because they were worried that they were going to get blown to bits as well. so they ran off and went into hiding, and then that's where like this paranoia kind of spun out, which kind of culminates in I think it's the Flowers of Romance. It's issue 54 or something like that, which is when Dennis eventually gets killed by gators.
He sure does.
Which is it's a fun end for any character, but yeah, it kind of all stems from that paranoia and like that obsessive idea of like focusing on this, like this could happen to us, and how it takes him down this really dark path, which I think is pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, totally. There are a bunch of sort of side characters in Swamp Thing that come and go, and I don't think we have a specific question about this, but this feels like a good place to bring it up. But we did mention Matthew Cable, who's sort of like an original sort of ancillary character in Swamp Thing stories, partly who the character of Alex Cable in the first movie is based off of. But Matthew Cable is he's like an agent who sort of, like works alongside, is sort of connected to Swamp Thing. Matthew Cable's got an interesting story because when he does eventually die, Morpheus, the Dream Lord, offers him a position as a Raven. And then, like, the Raven in, like, the early volumes of Sandman, it goes by Matthew. That's Matthew Cable. He moved from Swamp Thing into Sandman. That's a character that kind of kept going. He ended up working for Dream, which is kind of interesting. But that's sort of how like all those Vertigo titles were. I mean, they tied themselves to the DC universe as well, but they were definitely tied to each other. Like Constantine and Swamp Thing have lots of interactions. That's a connection to Sandman. So there's lots of little gem kind of crossovers in there. But yeah, that Matthew Cable character is not in his own right all that interesting to me, but I think it's kind of neat that they sort of use him to bridge some of these really different ideas. There's the one kind of spirituality in Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, like the green and stuff like that, and then you get this totally different kind of spirituality with the dreaming in Sandman, but they're connected by this character Matthew Cable, which is kind of neat.
It's all part of one universe.
That's awesome. All right, let's head on to the next question.
All right.
The next question comes from Cosmic DM. Dropping them space into my DMs. They ask, what are your thoughts on the 1982 movie Swamp Thing? Why do you think the character has survived so long, especially when others from that era haven't?
Well, let's slightly rephrase this question. How do you think that a movie that's objectively not that good, like the 1982 Swamp Thing, how do you think it was that it actually did help to sort of rejuvenate interest in the character?
That's a very good question. I mean, I think like because the film itself is just kind of fun fluff, even though it's a little darker than I think it gets credit for, because again, like it does kind of have that very like existential sad face Swamp Thing, which I really like,
because it doesn't lean full horror. It sort of it kind of uses that sort of gothic horror, like it's like the sentiment of it as opposed to like jump scares and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I know that Swamp Thing, like, as a character was kind of really petering out around that time. And so, like, they brought him back in for the movie. And then they're like, oh, wait, people are watching this. And this is on the general conscious for people. We should kind of keep going with this. And I don't know, because I was not alive at the time. I don't know if the 1982 movie popularity had anything to do specifically with Wes Craven's name attached, or if it was more specifically that it was Swamp Thing. Or it could be a wonderful blend of the two.
And I think there's something to the idea that there's a little bit of a boost because of the movie, but then there's a reason that Alan Moore takes over in issue 20, right? Like there's only 19 issues of this rejuvenated Swamp Thing run before they're like someone else has to come in. And then Alan Moore's run is the one where the character really like develops some like depth to the mythology, and it really becomes the Swamp Thing that we know now. So, maybe the movie sort of temporarily got people like into it again, but there's the thing that made it last, I think, was changing direction. Like Alan Moore's version goes full horror, goes into the body horror thing. The anatomy lesson that we've talked about lots on this podcast is the one that showed that he wasn't a man like turned into a monster. He was just plants that thought they were a man.
Yeah, and that's
I love that so much. And again, like, I think that with Alan Moore, because he was kind of a relatively unknown writer at the time, and they just kind of like pulled him in. They're like, you just fucking do whatever the hell you want. This is a dwindling franchise. Nobody's probably going to read it. So just like go ham with it. And because the character itself, like, there's really nothing else out there that's kind of like Swamp Thing. He's kind of really his own monster. And he's got so much flexibility with the storyline and the side characters. You know, again, like Alan Moore brought in so many of those supernatural side DC characters that like kind of got shoved off to the sidelines. And because he started bringing them back in, that trend kind of continued with Neil Gaiman and kind of pushed off into Vertigo Comics as a whole. But yeah, I think that, especially when you look at issues like, is it Love and Death, I think, is the one where like it gets really fucking dark. And that was one that I think that at that point they're just like, they stopped sort of getting permission from the, oh my gosh, what is the thing? From the comics board commission.
Yeah, the Comics Code Authority had basically lost its teeth by that point.
Yeah, and the Comics Code Authority, like, Swamp Thing was the first, Alan Moore's Swamp Thing was the first sort of comic to go on without the Comics Code Authority's green light. They're just like, well, this is basically everything that they do not want to see in a comic. It's got, like, gross violence, it's got horror, it's got, like, weird, creepy incest, it's got all this stuff that, like, nobody really wants to see in a comic, so we're just going to take it and just slide it under the radar there.
And I think the other big proof that the character, that Alan Moore saw something special in the character and ran with it, is that original story that we talked about that's in House of Secrets 92 or 96, whatever issue that was, the one with Alex Olsen, with sort of Victorian set. That one is very clearly like a gothic horror story. When Swamp Thing got his own series and they made him Alec Holland, part of the direction from DC was they were like, make him a bit more superhero-y. So then he was like a swamp monster that would fight bad guy, you know what I mean? And I think that was the version that the first movie is kind of based off of. And then Alan Moore was like, no, we need to go back to this like self-loathing gothic horror, existential dread sort of version of things.
Yeah, like the first movie kind of gave him a more noble direction. I mean, the suit itself was terrible. He had like a Star Trek Cardassian neck thing going on with super droopy pecs, which was like, I felt so sad. But they made him a hero. They made him a very heroic character. And maybe that was what kind of brought him back to everyone's attention, was this is a new hero. This is a new superhero that's not wearing a cape.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, totally.
I can't speak on behalf of 1982. I don't know what they wanted at the time.
No, you're speaking for 1982. You are the representation of 1982.
And they can fucking deal with it.
Yeah, god damn it. All right, let's head on to the next question.
All right.
Coming from Talking Superman.
All right.
What the hell is he doing with Swamp Thing? He's talking Superman. This is not...
Get out of here.
Man, what are you doing? Talking Superman asks, why is he blue by the end of the series?
Right, yeah.
Well, he went through a lot of things, and it was really sad.
Oh, well, he was that kind of blue.
I'm blue.
Maybe because of My Blue Heaven. Like, I imagine it has to do something with My Blue Heaven. I don't know around the time that, like, he started turning blue, but, like...
So
I would think that was...
In those Alan Moore comics, for those who may or may not have read them or need a bit of a refresher, at one point... Swamp Thing's body is completely burned, and something happens, and he's not able to tap into the green. Like, I forget what they call it. Like, his frequency shifts or something. Weapon. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a Lex Luthor designed weapon that, like, takes out his psychic connection with the Earth, and then, like, they fucking napalm him and destroy him, and so his consciousness sort of, like, whoop, goes up to space and finds this all-blue planet.
Exactly. So, his consciousness ends up on this alien planet, is able to tap into its vegetation, but all of it is blue. And so he builds himself a new body, and that's where Blue Swamp Thing comes from, is it's, like, literally on an alien planet, like, using alien... vegetation to rebuild his body. You do see Blue Swamp Thing like as sort of nods and references and other things. And by the end of Charles Sewell's run in the New 52 on Swamp Thing, there's a big like panel where a bunch of past Swamp Things are assembled, and the blue one is in there. You can see him in there. But yeah, it's tied to that. It's tied to the fact that he had his body incinerated and he couldn't connect to the green anymore.
Mm-hmm. And Doc, I believe the plural is Swamp Fangs.
Just a little
Right.
corrections corner
Sorry.
over here.
And in the past tense, it's Swamp Thung. I Swamp Thunged so hard.
Swamp things. You make my heart sing.
Full circle.
All right, let's head to the next question from Raspberries Reviews.
That's your favorite one.
That's my favorite. Yeah, I like that one a lot.
I like that.
They ask, I have never seen the Swamp Thing movies, so could you recommend them? Also, what do you love about the character and where does he rank in your list of favorite DC characters?
So, just quick yes or no. Kelly, would you recommend either Swamp Thing or Return of Swamp Thing?
Maybe.
That's such a soft maybe.
Solid maybe. I mean, I think that it really kind of depends. If you're going in looking for like just sort of ridiculous schlock fun, yeah, absolutely. Go for it. It's ridiculous and I would say more so Return of Swamp Thing than straight up Swamp Thing, because again, it is a little bit more morose, that first one. But if you want something that like is a legitimate honorable representation of the character, I don't know. Maybe not so much.
I think I recommend watching both because each of them has a thing that I wish like both of them had. Like the second one actually
they're good together.
The second one actually demonstrates some like actual Swamp Thing. You know, like some of his like actual powers, some of the actual things to fear about his villain, you know, Arcane and stuff like that. Like the second one, like I said earlier, is like way more faithful to some comic book stuff. But the first one gets the tone right, where it's kind of grim, bleak, like it's almost like a Scandinavian like crime drama. It's just the events of the movie happen and then it's over. Like it's not.
Yeah.
It's just kind of sad. It sort of just leaves you there. He shuffles back into the swamp and he goes, "No, I'm just this way now." I wish those elements were together in one movie. For that, I think I recommend both because you need something of each of them to get the character.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree 100%. I think that they're stronger together. I do agree with that. And I would also kind of love to see Swamp Thing like just transplanted into like Lilyhammer or something.
Yes.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Or on the bridge or something like that.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that'd be great.
Now,
Dear DC.
DC execs.
You're always listening.
Now, the second part of that question is, like, what do you think of the character of Swamp Thing? Let's say just beyond movies, beyond even just like that one run. Like, is this a character that you're into, that you identify with, or that you want to read more of? And if so, what is it about the character that sort of draws you in? Or if that's not the case, what is it about the character that shuts you out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love that, again, like that emotional complexity of just being, specifically with Alan Moore's run, of just being like a pure monster while still having that mental or psychological connection to like being a real boy. And like, that's something I personally really connect with, inhabiting this shell that is a weird body that I have, and just waiting to transplant onto the demon plane where I belong. But yeah, so he is, I mean, I really don't know too many other DC characters, but I mean, other than the obvious ones, but I would say that he's probably my favorite at this point because I love the flexibility that also comes with his storylines.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to, I said this on the previous episode with Kyle Clark. I tend not to trust a story if it ends too easily or too happily, if things tie up nicely. And the thing that I always liked about Swamp Thing and a lot of these Vertigo stories is that some things get left untended to. There are some loose ends or some things don't fully resolve so everyone is happy. And certainly in the case of Swamp Thing, because it for the majority of its run, with some exceptions, it does kind of lean on that sort of Mary Shelley, like the self-loathing monster kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's like the same reason I like BoJack Horseman. It's the same reason I like Anton Chekhov plays. It's the same reason that I like Wallander and those like Swedish crime shows and things like that. I like the sort of the idea that the story doesn't end when you stop reading it or when no one is telling it anymore. There's more to it. Yeah. It keeps going. It's that like Dr. Manhattan, nothing ever ends, Adrian kind of thing. that I like, and I think that's the thing that gets me with Swamp Thing, is that this is a character who can never be truly happy, because even when he fully accepts himself as quote unquote monstrous or as a plant or whatever, then he's like, he has to do the bidding of the Parliament of Trees. He doesn't always agree with them. Like, they've got their own agenda that he's not super down with. He's trying to work out his relationship with Abby Arcane and all these kind of other things, right? Yeah.
He's just like very morose and very lonely and just basically stuck living out this life he doesn't really want to do.
Yeah, he's never settled.
So where does he rank?
Ooh, like in like favorite.
In your
characters?
favorite DC characters?
I'd say he's probably he's easily
top 10.
Easily top 10.
What about you, Kelly?
I mean, I would say top 5.
Ooh,
Yeah,
I like that.
I couldn't tell you what the other 4
I was going to say,
are.
who are the other 4?
Batman,
Sure.
Wonder Woman,
Sure.
Oh yeah.
Polar opposite of Aquaman. No, I'm kidding. Aquaman's great. Sorry.
I think we're done here.
No, I think we can keep going.
Yeah, he's definitely in the top 5. But again, like, I don't know too many outside of like the Justice League sort of.
How about you, Richard?
Main
I mean, like
characters.
we talk about a ton of different characters.
Yeah.
We've done it for like 78 episodes now. Of the different concepts and characters that we've talked about, is Swamp Thing one that's kind of like on the radar? Is that one that you would consider like a top 10 sort of thing for you?
It's
no?
definitely a character that I find is very pulpy, and it's something that I've wanted to learn more about for sure.
Right.
Having not have done that, it's difficult for me to put that on. I think just based on pure concept, I definitely put him or it in like the top 10 to top 20 for sure.
Sure.
Nice.
Who are the other top 19?
Yeah, I know. No. I think that like I think I tend to lean towards some of the weirder characters anyways. So for me, I could see him going towards the top for sure, having given an opportunity. Right. And I've read bits and pieces of Alan Moore, but like never really dived into it. So I think that art-wise, definitely often is very in the top. Like I like a lot of the sort of like movie poster, sort of old school horror poster stuff that they do with Swamp Thing.
Yeah, totally.
So from that standpoint, I think it's very high ranked for me. But story wise, I just haven't had the opportunity to really dive into it, and something that I should have to do. But I think that's something that it's probably not brought up enough in these questions, but something that deserves the time is to talk about the artwork, because I think that they do. It's something that's so different from so much of DC's other work.
That's true.
But like even by like artist to artist, like the Swamp Thing sort of the general sort of styling that they do with him seems to be fairly consistent, and regardless is really different from the rest of it, and they use color palette that seems to be a lot more unusual compared to the rest of DC.
even that very first appearance of Swamp Thing, Bernie Wrightson does the art on that one, the story by Len Wein. It's the Victorian one. That one is mostly, I mean, it's the late 70s, so it's like single colors. It's not like it doesn't have like the full range of sort of shading and things that we see in comics now. But even that one, it plays with shadow and light so much. Like again, leaning into the gothic horror thing. It's very like the whole story is very like chiaroscuro. Like, I mean, there's like that's right.
Yeah, big words.
Yeah, I read a play that used that word in it once. But like there's so much of just black in the panels, like you're just seeing like outlines or just eyes in the dark,
which is very similar to like Batman, but it's interesting to see it used with a different character.
Well, and where Batman does that to evoke noir for the most part, where Swamp Thing does it to evoke horror. I mean, they can both do it for both, but they come at it from different angles. So I do think there's something interesting to the artwork that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the two storylines that kind of struck me the most visually was Love and Death, because it's just horrific and gorgeous. And Rites of Spring is what it's called, not Spring Awakening. I could hear everyone in the who's listening just like screaming at me what it's actually called. But yeah, Rites of Spring, I love that it kind of
when they're
All the Spring Awakening fans
kind of
just
taking-
close their laptops.
But I love that, like, once they've taken that sort of psychedelic, it shifts. So it goes from like landscape to portrait. So it's all just sort of linear as opposed to, and you have to physically turn the book to read it. And I love that kind of how it forces you to like put yourself in a different position and imagine where they are. And I love the artwork of that storyline.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. Well, let's head on to the next question.
All right.
Comes from Puff's Cheek Pastries. Puff Cheek Pastries makes lots of food, makes delicious treats for me. I wish I could cook.
I was just gonna ask, do you have a song for this?
You goddamn right we have a song for Puff Cheek Pastries.
That's amazing.
Oh, you can tell I'm sobering up because I'm actually being able to like stay in key slightly. So.
Do you know what? Like, this is a slight diversion, but like years ago, Kelly and I made like we sort of joked that we wanted to release a rap album that was only hype.
Yes.
And I think we should do an episode that's only drops.
I think when I had the soundboard for a while, we were close to doing that. So
That's true. Yeah.
that's awesome. All right, let's go on to the question, which Puff Cheek Pastries asks: does the psychology of body horror plague the character of Swamp Thing's psyche? What effect did the anatomy lesson story have on the concept of past and current identity?
Well, let's take it from the research angle, Kelly, because you said you've been doing lots of like look into sort of like the cultural context of horror, like that different cultures tell different types of horror stories. So is there anything from stuff that you've like read or researched that kind of connects to the body horror angle of Swamp Thing, or that idea that Swamp Thing discovers that he was never a man, he's only plants that believe themselves to have been a man?
Oh, totally. I mean, I think with body horror, it's got this kind of focus on like physical vulnerability and the loss of control over your own body. So body horror has its roots in Gothic horror going back to like Frankenstein. So that, I mean, we've been saying Frankenstein a lot in comparison to Swamp Thing, but I mean, more recently, like Cronenberg took it kind of the next level with like The Fly and Rabbit and Shivers, and like I'd say to a certain extent Videodrome as well. So it's a theme that's really popular in Canadian horror, specifically on the side of transformation, which I think kind of has to go back to culturally, like it's that idea of adaptation and that idea of assimilation, whereas American audience tend to go with like more gore porn stuff. It's also like really big in Japan. I mean, Junji Ito's work is both gorgeous and the most physically repulsive imagery. Like it's beautiful, but like you get a guttural reaction, and like Tetsuo the Iron Man as well is another great example of that. But I think with Swamp Thing, it's this kind of a weird battle because he's stronger physically because of this transformation, but again, he's just this monster who kind of thinks he's more. So it's a fun little twist on that anxiety of that vulnerability. So I mean, for Alec Hammond, it's not so much a transformation, but he's transposed, I guess, in Alan Moore's specifically. So with that body horror, it's that idea of he's got this consciousness that's in this body that he does not understand and that he's not familiar with and isn't really even human. So he's still striving to find his humanity, which is kind of a big thing with body horror as well, especially when it comes to transformation, is having that conflict and having that struggle between whatever you're becoming, this monster you're becoming, and still either trying to maintain or regain humanity.
That's the Kafka thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's that, I forget which play. Is it Rhinoceros?
No, it's the Metamorphosis. That's the one where he turns into a beetle.
Yes.
And I think at one point in that book, there's like the moment where he's become so much of a beetle that he mates with another beetle, but he's still got like the human mind, but he's like, this is what I am now. There's like, yeah.
Which is great. But yeah, I think it's for anatomy lesson, like for that issue specifically, it's not really having that distinction of his identity, which I think is sort of a big part of that whole Alan Moore storyline is that idea that like he's not actually Alec Hammond. He's just this monster, just this pure monster that doesn't really understand or really know his place in the world or what he is or who he is, and he's just having this constant sort of, he's trying to deal with that constantly, and I think that's really cool.
And an interesting thing that happened in the New 52, the Swamp Thing is actually one of those New 52 books that was really great. And part of what they do actually is they don't erase the anatomy lesson, but they undo it a little bit. The idea is that Alec Holland himself has been resurrected, and does have a connection to the green, and then it's revealed to him that he was meant to just become the Avatar, but he was killed and his body destroyed too thoroughly before that could happen. So then the Parliament of Trees created the artificial Swamp Thing, the anatomy lesson Swamp Thing, to take his place, but it was flawed. And then eventually, by the end of Scott Snyder's first arc on that book, Alec Holland himself, the way that kind of Len Wein had done it, becomes Swamp Thing again. So the whole anatomy lesson thing happened. Alec Holland had sort of transposed memories from that Swamp Thing. So they didn't undo it, but they did make him Alec again. So now both versions are true again, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, that's a story that sort of built on Alan Moore's work, and then really like went with Alan Moore, kind of touched on the idea of other kingdoms and things like that.
Right.
And then the New 52 one, like there's the Mycos, which is the gray, it's like the fungal kingdom. There's the Divided, which is the bacteria kingdom. There's the Rhythm, which is the machine kingdom. There's like all of these different like realms of consciousness and sort of kingdoms of nature that exist that are kind of built off that Alan Moore run, basically.
We started it all.
That's awesome. All right, let's head over to Facebook.
Going to the face of the book.
Going to the Facebook. And I know this is just all chock-a-block full of drops.
And specifically, there's some blatant Homestar Runner ripoff.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm going to react to every single one because this is very exciting.
You're far too kind for this terrible podcast.
You're in the belly of the beast.
All right. The first question comes from Matthew Poulter.
That son of a bitch.
His question is, could Swamp Thing grow a green so large that he himself could not protect it? You son of a bitch.
No, Poulter. God damn it, no. Next question.
What an asshole.
Moving
Doc,
on.
if you want
to... I actually don't think that he could create a green soap, because at one point he sacrifices the Parliament of Trees. They are destroyed, and he's the only protector of the green that's left. I actually think Swamp Thing is powerful enough to protect the green no matter what. Because sometimes the Parliament of Trees actually gets in his way. And if he had their full power just in him, I think he could do it. So to give a legitimate answer to what was clearly a trolley question, yes, I don't think he could build a green so large that he himself could not protect it.
What an asshole.
Jesus.
Well, with that, the Dr. DC podcast will be back after this quick break. Hey there, residents. This episode of the Dr. DC podcast is brought to you thanks to our amazing sponsors, Great Lakes Grooming Co. They sent us some awesome products to try, so let's check them out. We have the pine tar soap. This is amazing. We use it all the time at my house. It's a really wonderful sort of peppermint smell to it. It's a traditional recipe that they've developed themselves, and it's awesome. It's a great way to get clean and smell good every day. As well, I love the peppermint lip balm, especially this time of the year, living where we do, constantly getting sort of dry lips, and it's a huge pain. So definitely want to use that. Great Lakes Grooming is meant to be easy to use, rain or shine. All their products are purposely designed and environmentally responsible, handmade here in Canada, really ready for adventure wherever one may find themselves. For you lucky listeners, we also have an opportunity where you can get 10% off on Great Lakes Grooming regular priced products by going to www.greatlakesgrooming.com and using the promo code DRDC podcast. That's right, www.greatlakesgrooming.com. Promo code is DRDC podcast. Back to the show. Yeah. And we're back.
Hey,
We're back.
That was a great ad, and I know what it sounds like.
Yeah. It was weird, all the racist comments that was made.
Don't use that one, Richard.
You'll only know if you listen to the ad.
No, edit.
Oh, and all that sexist stuff that Kelly said. I really wasn't expecting that. How offensive. You'll only know if you listen to the ad.
I like how you're advertising for an offensive ad.
Well, I figured they'll be like, "Oh, I want to listen to it," so they'll go back and because I'm sure everybody skips through the ads.
They'll go back to the 20 seconds they just were listening to.
I gotta hear this.
Yeah. So that's why we put in all that racist stuff so that you guys listen to them.
Jesus. What a strategy.
I'm always thinking like a business person.
Sure.
All right, well, let's head on over to Instagram.
Now we're going to Instagram, take some questions and answer them.
Did you like that one, Kelly? I bet you did.
I did.
We got another question from Stump Chunkman.
Oh, step into the stump. No, you know what? You got one.
You got one. You can only get one. I'm trying to get in here twice. You only get one. You already try it with different names.
What did Stump ask?
He asks, think a current live-action Swamp Thing movie could work?
Well, we're getting the TV series on DC Universe that's being produced by James Wan.
Yeah, James Wan is executive producing the series. Derek Mears, who played Jason Voorhees in the Friday the 13th reboot in 2009, is supposedly playing Swamp Thing. And it's written by Gary Doberman, who wrote Andy Machetti's It and It Chapter 2 whenever that comes out.
And isn't it the director or whatever from like Ultraviolet or something like that?
Ugh.
I'm not sure. I hadn't seen a director attached yet, but I know it's also co-written by Mark Verheiden, who the guy who wrote Battlestar Galactica, and he wrote Daredevil as well. Yeah. So that's
so the Floronic Man is a Cylon.
Yes, I'd watch that.
I would too.
I totally would. That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, we are by definition getting another live action one. I guess we don't know yet whether or not it works, but
I still think that if you're gonna do like if you're gonna do a live action Swamp Thing, it has to be practical. I think that as soon as you just start acting like I still don't think we're at a point with CGI that you can have it as a main character and feel like the sort of like the emotions that you would with an actual person. So I think you still need to do like practical effects if you're going to do that.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm hoping with James Wan that he would. I'm hoping with James Wan that he would because like it's kind of his roots is he's done a lot of those practical effects horror, and like Gary Doberman. I know like with It, they've done a ton of practical effects for that, and I think in horror as well, like practical effects are kind of making a comeback in a big way, which I love because there's nothing more like physically visceral than actually being able to see it and know that it's there.
And film in general, I feel like is going that way. You know, like obviously all of the new Star Wars movies have gone back to actually building sets and shit like that, not like the green screen fest of the prequels.
And like they've actually
Mad Max Fury Road. Mad Max Fury Road was all like practical effects basically. I think in general there's like some pushback against just doing everything on a computer. There's some things you need a computer for. There's some things you just can't do well practically. But I think
or safely.
Or safe. Well, yeah. Safety fifth. You're right.
Just as long as it doesn't look like that Skin of Evil guy from Star Trek, the like Tar guy.
The Tar guy,
from TNG, As long as it doesn't look like that guy, I think. Yeah.
Tasha.
Oh, poor Tasha.
Can we have Swamp Thing bring back Tasha Yar? Is that in the cards?
You know what?
It would have to be Blue Swamp Thing because he'd be in space.
You know what? If media has taught us anything, is that Tasha Yar can come back an infinite amount of times. So
Well,
it's my
Swamp
time
Thing
traveling
movies have
mother.
taught us anything. Yeah, if Swamp Thing movies have taught us anything, is that he can bring people back from the dead.
Oh, that's true.
There we go.
You just need the glow hand.
It's still. I'd still love to see like a totally dark Alan Moore version as a film.
Oh yeah,
right.
Just because I would enjoy that personally.
I want a Guillermo Swamp Thing so bad.
I'm excited for the TV show. I'm going to watch the TV show, but I think as far as a film goes, I would rather see Swamp Thing and someone else. Doesn't have to be a full Justice League Dark thing, but I'd want Swamp Thing and Constantine or something like that. Like
you think it needs to be like a buddy movie?
Well, maybe not quite. Like that's not how I would pitch it because that's not the tone I'd want. But like,
come on, we gotta fight these demons, Swamp Thing. No, okay.
Your swamp and your badge on my desk.
Oh, sorry, I left some swamp on your desk. Oh, let me take it off.
Do you know what? You deserve each other.
Oh, that's just me. I'm just swampy.
When crime comes to the swamp.
The only theme song that would possibly work with that show. I mean, I don't know if they're looking for a theme song for James Wan's series, but
he's a swamp man. Swamp. Can you dig it?
Shaft.
He's a mysterious swamp. No one understands him but his woman. Swamp.
Who's that hunk of rotting plant material?
Swamp.
Jesus Christ. We just pitched so many things.
Oh, so many things. All right.
But I think that answers your question, Stub. There's clearly some, like, there's a well to go to.
Absolutely. There's a well we can pull from for sure. All right, let's go to the next question.
You just financed a bunch of your future seasons of the show.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, that's all we're ever doing.
Obviously.
All right. Let's go to the next question, which comes from the real Josh Gill.
Gill.
Sexy ass Gill.
Yeah, we get it, man.
I just want to penetrate him.
No, come on. Come on.
He said he was okay with it online. He said he liked it.
Well,
yeah, you like it, you little Gill.
Jesus Christ.
You little Joshy.
We can never have you in the same room.
Oh, God.
Or on webcam.
Ooh. I mean, I already have him on webcam. Not that he's aware of it. Josh, stop listening.
You have Omegle open. You've been just, like, going through different, random chats. You're trying to find Josh Gill. You don't even know that he's logged on.
Josh! Ah, damn, next. Josh! Ah, damn. All right, let's see what Josh has to ask, which is, why is Alan Moore's run considered the run on Swamp Thing and not one of Len Wein's runs?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. Kelly, thoughts?
Yeah, I think, partially, so I think there's a couple of different answers to this. I think partially it's emotional complexity. Not to say that, other comics don't have emotional complexity, but that idea that Moore brought into it that he's not actually Alec Hammond, that he just believes he's actually a monster is pretty fucking wild. The supernatural elements, which again, like we kind of talked about earlier with Constantine and that kickstarted that whole trend that kind of went into Vertigo Comics. The fact that the series was headed for cancellation before Moore took over as well, like he was just kind of given free reign to do whatever the hell and he just fucking ran with it. And I think it kind of launched Moore's career as well. Like it just jettisoned with Watchmen later on, but this was kind of the first widely acknowledged as fucking amazing pieces of work in Alan Moore's portfolio ? Sure, yeah, but I think because this was one of those ones that, again, jettisoned his career, that it's attributed back to, like, it's kind of, I think they feed into each other, that Alan Moore's amazing and people found out with Swamp Thing, and Swamp Thing's amazing and people found out because of Alan Moore.
Yeah, and I mean, there are lots of examples of the best or most iconic run of a character not being created by the character's creator. I mean, that's true of most characters. What's a little bit weird is that, like, Swamp Thing was only created like 5 years before Moore took over. You know, like for that to be such, it's not like, you know, like Denny O'Neil's Batman, like Bob Kane was still alive, but he hadn't written Batman in decades. Like there was no sort of like separation of like eras or things like that. It was like Len Wein was writing it, people weren't into it, and then Alan Moore took over his character and crushed it. I think the only saving grace is that Len Wein's original vision was kind of what Alan Moore was basing things off of. That if you were going to blame anything, it was that sort of superhero-y thing that DC editorial wanted him to go for. But yeah, I mean, the other thing too is that there's actually just not that much Swamp Thing written by Len Wein.
Yeah.
There's the Moore run is massive. He has time to explore stories, and even though he goes right out of the gate with Anatomy Lesson, that really iconic one, he wrote Swamp Thing for so long. There's just not that many Len Wein stories, and certainly not that many of like substance. So that's part of it too, I think.
Yeah, and I think also with Len Wein as well, like Swamp Thing was always kind of wanted to be a monster story, I think. It's very much a monster comic, but it didn't really become a monster until Alan Moore took it. Like, he starts being a monster trying to find his humanity rather than being a human that kind of is put in this weird position as being a monster and like, oh, how do I cope with this? I love that it's about that journey to kind of rectify that idea that he's not what he thinks he is. He's not what he thinks he should be. And it's just like a true monster story. And again, it embraces all those horror elements in a beautiful way.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Nice. Well, now we're leaving Instagram and heading over to email. Check the email. Hope it's from a female.
I understood that reference.
We figured you would, yeah.
I put my best foot forward.
Tractor! Burning across the nation. Tractor!
There we go.
All right. The email that we've got.
Welcome to the Dr. Homestar podcast.
Homestar, what a...
Homestar, what a... Oh, little Buono.
It's a coach here. The early 2000s.
I'm taking a wine break.
What a time.
Wait, here. I'm going to do my Poopsmith impression. There you go.
That was good. I like that.
Nailed it.
Okay, I'm going to do the first question now. Email. So the only email we got this week is from a funny guy who thinks he's real funny and makes his name is Richard, which is Richard with instead of an A there was an S, and their email was producerrichard@fakeemail.com. You guys think you're real funny, residents?
Do you know what? I think that it's one listener that keeps doing.
I'm
fake
worried
email
that it is, and I swear to God, if it's Stum Junkman, I'm gonna lose my fucking mind. You know what? You guys get 1, maybe 2 chances to get a question in. You start putting in these fake email addresses, acting like you're multiple people, trying to game the system. It's not old Papa Richard's not. You're not getting past me. I get it.
I don't think it's Stump, but I do think all of the fake email addresses are one person trolling.
I feel like it's because it keeps being at fakeemail.com, and you know what? It was funny the first time. And now I'm getting a little pissed off.
Jesus.
But I'm going to keep...
Richard, put the knife down.
You know what? Enough of this! This is... You know what I'm thankful for? This knife!
Oh my God. Why does this happen every Thanksgiving?
You shut your mouth. Eat your turkey.
Okay.
So Richard asks... Arcane is very different in the movies from the comics. What works about the film version, and what works from the comics? What from the comics do you wish was in the films?
What works is Louis Jourdain busting his ass and chewing the hell out of some scenery, I think. And what I would love to see, again, I would love to see Love and Death, that storyline, but that's so fucking dark. I don't think that could happen. Or even like Jason Woodrow's storyline in Anatomy Lesson. I really love that one, but that's not really Arcane. But I think he's just gnawing on some scenery, and it's just a delight.
I mean, in Return of Swamp Thing, we get bits of we get more of comic book Arcane, where he's sort of functionally immortal through nefarious means. He's doing these like creepy body horror experiments, creating the unmen,
like the unmen, yeah. My chair's making noises.
The thing that's not in there that certainly would not have fit the tone of that movie is that like Anton Arcane is. I said this last episode too. He's more evil and more incarnate evil than even like the Joker. Like there are things you would never see the Joker do that Arcane would do. Like this is a character who is meant to be from like the turn of the century. He's obsessed with death and immortality to the point that he's like a necrophiliac. He becomes like a field doctor in the First World War so that he can take the corpses and do experiments and have sex with them and like stuff like that.
Sexy.
And then he's the one that kind of like helps bring Hitler to power, not because he necessarily believes in Nazism, because he knows there's going to be another world war and he'll have more bodies to like fuck/experiment on.
Less sexy.
It's super messed up. I mean, like he's so like corrupted. It's that thing in like Shakespeare where, you know, if you disrupt the natural order, then like terrible horrors are visited upon you. That's like the big like theme in Macbeth and things like that. That's why like literally like the you know, he's worried about the forest coming, like when the Burnham Wood, all that kind of stuff. It's the same sort of thing in there where like Anton Arcane's unnatural pursuit of immortality and his unnatural predilection for like the dead and things like that turns him into a monster. And then eventually he does become the avatar of the rot, the avatar of the black. He becomes basically like death and rot incarnate. I wish any of that was in the movies. Like I said, it wouldn't have fit the tone of the second one. It may have been even too dark for the first one, but just something more than just he's a guy who wants to live forever. It's that it's so consuming an idea that it makes him monstrous. He doesn't need to even literally be a monster, but it sort of does it to him, right?
It corrupts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, side note, Predilection for the Dead would be a dope band name. You're welcome.
Oh, ooh, yeah.
Hell yeah, I just started that band.
Yeah, I can play accordion in it. It's an accordion band.
No.
I know 2 notes.
It's an accordion.
Doc, no.
It's an accordion and a theremin and a triangle.
This is why you're never invited to band practice.
Ting!
Timing is terrible, but damn it, he's got spirit.
We're Predilection for Death, and here we go.
That was our first song.
That was nice.
Gorgeous.
You know what? We could use it to score our Buddy Swamp Thing movie. In a swamp where crime is rampant. Two partners will have to learn to work together.
Hey, I don't think I can work with you. Oh, I don't think I'll work with you either.
I'm getting too swamped for this shit.
The money comes rolling in.
It's literally a license to print money.
Oh my god.
All right.
This is like the good ideas episode.
I know, seriously.
Holy shit, we should just call this episode Good Ideas.
Yeah. just dollar signs.
The episode title is just dollar signs.
All right, do we want to head on to the next question?
Let's do it, yeah.
We're leaving email and we're heading on over to Reddit, where everything's nice and no one's ever mean.
Yeah.
That's it?
Never.
No drop. First question comes from, or the only question, then the last question from all of our questions comes from Aussieman Diaz.
Oh, I see what you did.
Aussieman _ Diaz.
Yeah.
I don't get it. What?
Ozymandias? Adrian Veidt? He destroyed the world in 1985, 35 minutes ago.
Oh my god, I don't know, I still don't get it.
Oh my god, I'm so fucking tired of this. I go through this every fucking week. It's Watchmen, man. It's a fucking seminal comic book. You have to read. If you have to read one thing, just read fucking Watchmen. I'm going to drop it in a reference every week. It's going to happen. I'm going to like put it in there somewhere 35 minutes ago. It's not that fucking hard of a thing. Just fucking read the fucking goddamn Watchmen.
I don't get it. All right, let's see what Ozymandias has to say. In recent Swamp Thing, I've noticed that Swamp Thing is able to speak normally, rather than the difficult, staggered speech of the early ST comics. That's Swamp Thing. Oh. He's shortened it because he's a cool guy.
Yeah, he must
or
be
cool girl. Could be a cool.
Must be on the inside.
What?
Like the inner circle of the...
Oh, okay. They go on to say, is this a recent change, or did he get over that hurdle like a long time ago?
I like to think that maybe he just like watched Return of Swamp Thing and was like, oh, okay, cool, I can just do that. All right, awesome, great.
Yeah, I mean to me not need to talk like this no more.
So even in the first Swamp Thing,
me can make slight banter. Me think this great.
It's like Hulk talk show host.
Me wonder if you've seen Good Thing. Yeah. It's a great show.
Me want to thank you for being on show tonight.
Me think Seth Meyers is half okay.
We go to break. When we come back, me introduce new guest.
me think Jimmy Fallon was okay, but Seth Meyers do bring new things.
Yeah, welcome to Tonight Hulk. So even in the first Swamp Thing movie, he doesn't speak for a bit, and then he speaks, and it's like very labored. And I think it's playing off that idea, even from the comics, that he's got to like learn how to use his new body, like the vocal cords and stuff like that. And then he starts saying things like, he just goes like, cable, like he's only doing that for a bit. And then by the end of the movie, he's like, I need to return to the swamp. But like, he's just like, it takes like,
he's learning.
It's like a grand total of like 28 minutes of screen time. He like goes to full sentences.
Me think this archetype is ubiquitous.
He basically, he can't speak very well until it gets to the point where Arcane like needs an answer from him, and then he's like, well, the formula actually just and then in the second one, yeah, like we said, he's basically Tony Stark. Like he's just being like flippant and like making like jokes the whole time. In the comics, he's always there's always like the ... like it's labored, like it's hard for him to speak out loud or speak, the way we speak. As I don't remember when that stopped, but I know that in the New 52 that wasn't a thing. So I don't know if it went all the way up right till then, like right before everything sort of got rebooted, like if it was the end of that Vertigo series. I don't know. I think it's pretty consistent through like the earlier eras of Swamp Thing. Kelly, you're the one that just reread a bunch of them. He does the labored talk like through Moore's run.
Oh, yeah. I think that, I mean, maybe if we want to play this game, maybe it's just the longer he's around, he's getting more comfortable, again, with his awkward new body and all the changes that's going through.
I'm going through changes in my life.
Something.
New season of Big Mouth on Netflix now.
We're just doing drops for like words in sentences now.
Just gonna start saying random things and see what we can get a trigger for.
Jesus Christ.
I feel like I should just like say Born on the Bayou again because...
Oh yeah, that's right.
I don't get what's that from?
CCR?
I don't know. What's that?
Oh my god. Just read fucking Watchmen.
Dropped ball.
Yeah, I actually think
like that comfort.
I think it might be the New 52 where that changed. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think Kelly's right. I think like after a certain point, it's like he can probably talk now. He's the master of the green. He can make functioning vocal cords. Like it shouldn't be that hard for him.
He just wanted to have a Tony Stark punchline and drive off in a Jeep.
That's right.
Don't we all?
That's right.
One question that I do have about Return of Swamp Thing. Is it like known that Swamp Thing is his name? Because like random henchman number 5 just radios over and he's like, oh, the Swamp Thing's here. And it just seemed odd to me that was just like his known moniker.
It is his known moniker. I think they started like they try to make it sort of like natural that he's like the Swamp Thing. But then like there's like anytime he's encountered like a superhero, they're like, oh, Swamp Thing, or like Superman might say something like Dr. Holland, like because he's polite and he's Superman, but like Batman would just be like Swamp Thing, like they just call him Swamp Thing. That's how he's known.
That seems rude.
And I think even I think he is just widely known as Swamp Thing.
I just love that, like, henchman number 5 over there just, like, threw it out like it was no big thing. And everyone's like, oh, okay, cool, let's go get him. And they're there, like, 20 seconds later. Like, literally 20 seconds later.
It'd be funny if that was, like, the first time that he heard it. If he was like, Swamp Thing's movie thing. He's like, oh, come on, I have a name.
Yeah. I'm not just some sort of swamp thing.
Or it'd be more like, come on, I have a name.
Me no swamp thing.
I actually almost just did the Elephant Man. I'm not an animal. By definition, I'm a plant.
I'm actually many
He's been
plants.
like trying to go by Swampy for the last 20 years and it just hasn't picked up. Everyone just keeps reverting.
My name is Sean Fang.
Name Swamp Thing. You can call me Swampy.
I have this damn list, but my name is Sean Fang.
He goes through like several different changes, like he's Snoop Lion at some point.
I'm now just going by Swamp.
Yeah.
The artist formerly known as Swamp.
That's right.
Now I'm Bug Thing.
Swamp Lion.
Swamp Bug. Fuck. Yeah. So I actually didn't give Kelly a heads up about.
Oh, you didn't? We're going to. Well, we're done our question segment, and we're heading over to our everyone's favorite segment of the show, which is called Dial Doc. This is pulled from an old comic trope called Dial H.
Yeah, Dial H for Hero. It was like a little magical phone dial, and when you dialed Hero, it would turn you into a random hero for an hour, but it wouldn't turn you into like Superman or something like that. It would be completely made up. And they used to do it so that readers could write in and be like, I think it would be cool if you made like Door Hinge Man and he could open. And then it was like a shitty idea, but you could do it for a little bit in a comic. So
because of that, what we do every week is we try to come up with our own weird character on the spot.
Yep.
So you just think of anything you could possibly, all you need to do is come up with a name and what their abilities are, and that's it. You can go in as much or as little detail as you'd like.
Yeah.
Doc, do you have anything this week?
You got to prepare.
To be fair, I don't ever prepare. I literally think on the spot.
We almost exclusively forget about this segment
every single week.
We're in it. Yeah.
The only reason we even remember is because I write notes for every week. So,
I think I've got one. And he's called, or she is called Kaboom.
Ooh, Kaboom.
And Kaboom is basically has a bunch of like boom mics with different types of explosives in them that they can like drop on people. and that's it. And so they just replace like the big like boom. So like one is like a rocket and one is a grenade that they can just drop, or one is like a cartoony old timey bomb or things like that. But yeah, that's Kaboom.
I legitimately have not literally thought about this until I scrolled down and saw this.
Okay.
So I'm going to go off.
Sorry, until you scrolled down and saw this? So you mean like you've taken this from someone else?
No, I mean like I scrolled down and saw that we had this section of the podcast.
Oh, right.
Because I make notes for the questions and things like that.
Oh.
Yeah, because I'm prepared. But I am not prepared for this. So, I'm going to take from my life this evening.
Okay.
This character is called Ginjoy.
Okay.
Because I enjoy gin. So the character is called Ginjoy. It's a female character. She's super depressed.
You're taking this from your life?
Yeah. Very slow moving.
Doc, what have you done?
But she fights super quickly.
Okay.
When she fights, she's the only time in life she's very, very happy. But otherwise, she's very depressed and moves very slowly.
Right. She doesn't talk to her dad anymore.
Yeah. Because he started to date that new bitch.
Jesus Christ, Richard.
But yeah, that's character is Ginjoy.
Okay, so the character is depressed and slow moving, except in combat.
Yes, extremely fast in combat.
So. Fast and happy in combat.
Yes.
That's the saddest character you've come up with yet.
That's what I'm here for.
Jesus.
You didn't think I could get darker in that way, did you?
Well, no, I'll take that. Yeah. Okay. Kelly, do you want to make something up on the spot? Do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I mean, there it may already exist because there's fucking Dog Welder out there.
Well, that's that's true.
Who knew that was a thing?
I'm gonna say that there's he's gonna be I don't know if he's a hero or villain, but he's gonna be called the Stuffler.
And I like it.
And his only power is to animate like stuffed toys, but all they can do is scream.
So they're unable to move. They just scream over their horrible existence.
I mean, I can't think of a...
That's terrifying. I like
think
it.
Of more of a horror suggestion than that.
That's amazing.
They're just brought to life to scream and then snuffed out. Sorry, and he's called the Stuffler?
Sure, yeah.
Oh no, sorry. Did I misheard? I misheard the name then. What was the name?
No, I think it was the Stuffler.
Yeah, I know it was.
I don't recall at this point, but
it
just seemed like a. Because they're stuffed toys.
That's that's perfect.
Because they're stuffed toys that must suffer.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh,
I'm going to pretend
Jesus.
that was intentional.
That's good. No.
I love it. That's amazing.
Your genius is unending, Kelly. I really appreciate that. If people want to talk to you about the Stuffler or some of your amazing horror stuff, is there anything you want to promote or anywhere that people can find you online?
Oh my God, I'm all over the place online. I'm on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and I think my Facebook is also linked to this, is at Kells McNells, which is KELLSMCNELLS. I had to think about that for a second because I almost put in too many E's. I can be found rambling over at iHorror.com. I'm going to be covering Toronto After Dark Film Festival coming up as of the 11th this week. I don't know when this is going to air, but as of the 11th, I will be there doing coverage for that film festival. And then I also do on Facebook, I have a couple of video series called The Creepy Crafter, where I make
creepy crafts and I record it, and sometimes I make creepy drinks and just get drunk on camera.
Ooh, what's a creepy craft or a creepy drink? What would that look like?
So a creepy craft, like there was one of my favorites that I did is I took a doll, like a toy doll, and I turned it into a planter. So I like cut off the head and painted it and made it all bloody and creepy and gross and stuck a fake plant in there.
That's awesome.
Keep real plants alive. I'm terrible at plants.
No, I think a creepy drink is just a gin and tonic, but you're looking into someone else's house.
yeah. That's exactly it. I mean, there's another one that I'm particularly fond of at this point that I didn't realize I would be particularly fond of, but what the fuck? What did I call it? I think I just called it like the Blob or something. It was like rum, blue curacao, pineapple juice, and a splash of pina colada mix, and you put it in the blender, or you just like layer it, and it looks really gross but tastes really fucking good.
Ooh.
So if you want to watch me get drunk on camera and then edit the film while I'm drunk, you can check that out at Creepy Crafter or the Creepy Crafter on Facebook.
That's awesome.
And then everywhere else I'm at Kells McNells.
That's dope.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for coming on, for being part of Doctober. We talk about spooky
Thanks
things.
for having me.
Speaking of spooky things, Richard, I'm giving you a reading assignment for next week. Next week's episode of Doctober, we're going to be talking about killing,
and so death.
The question
murder
is the comic I'm giving you. I'm giving you the question quarterly number 1.
Quarterly number 1, also known as death.
Yeah, so that'll be the next episode of Doctober.
Ooh. Spooky one eye.
Oh, that's right. We can only talk about the eyes.
Yes. There's one eye. The other one is blocked by some sort of half mask.
Yeah.
Oh.
Right?
I like it.
Sounds specific.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for doing this.
Also,
thank you guys for having me.
Of course. residents, if we'd love to hear what your Dial Doc characters are. If you want to send us some of your ideas or talk with us online, first of all, use the hashtag Dial Doc and send us your idea for a hero or a villain, or maybe just send us a question for our next episode, or just nerd out with us on DC's things or some horror stuff, because this is spooky month, so we'll talk. Let us know what you're watching this month. Give us your October spooky movies and suggestions, because I'm out of options at this point. I feel like I've watched everything scary at this point, so give us some options online, and you can talk to Kelly McNeely.
And I will give you so many more movie recommendations, because I probably have a list that's about 50 titles long that I don't want to just basically make your podcast me talking about.
We're totally okay with that. It'd probably be much more successful. Ooh, even more spooky.
And so many listeners, it's scary.
The ideal of our failure. Ooh.
I've never felt good about myself.
My parents don't respect me. Ooh. If you want to reach out to us online, you can do so through our Facebook,
Dr. DC Podcast.
Through our Twitter,
at Dr. DC.
We got on the gram,
Dr. DC Podcast.
You can check our email,
drdcpodcast@gmail.com.
Oh, guess what? We got a subreddit.
That's right. r/Dr_DC.
We got a lot of cool stuff going on there. Also, not only can you talk to us, but you can also read some DC specific articles. You can view our many wares on our website, like our t-shirts and bags and sweaters and things like that. And that website, exactly. That website URL is
drdcpodcast.com or .ca.
And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. It's a small little thing, but instead of checking what every week you're going to listen to the episode, you don't need to think about what the next theme is going to be. Just subscribe.
Not just subscribe, download it.
Go into your friend's phone. Subscribe on theirs. Yeah, we want to make sure
them.
Exactly. It's like a gift from your friend.
Turn the volume down on their computer and just have it streaming in the background.
Yeah, those numbers mean something to us, and they help us out.
Especially when they're fake.
Yeah, and then if you want to help us out just one more step, you can rate and review us on iTunes. Give us 5 stars and write something in the comment, and we'll read it on the next episode.
We sure will.
But seriously, thank you so much, Kelly. This will be hopefully our first successful podcast. We appreciate you coming on to it. It's a lot of pressure on it for you.
So welcome. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well,
I got to do research. It's always exciting.
That's always the best part.
I love research.
And me too. You're welcome back anytime. I promise you. Even if the doctor's not here.
Let's talk about DC Comics at some point in the future. Let's do that.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you guys very much. And ciao, ciao.
Adios.
Say goodbye, Kelly.
I'm stopping my recording. Bye.
Awesome.
I'm just like, nope, we're done. That's it.
Superheroes, they always fight for what is right. Live with danger and adventure, they are men of might.
This was a Brain Freeze podcast.